What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Zach. Listen to me, and listen to me really good. Because I know a lot need to hear this. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to say this. And it's sad because what's sad about it is most people should know this. And unfortunately, a lot do know this, what I'm about to say. But they don't give a shit. And I say that because so many people think they're better than everyone else. And trust me, I've saw those kind of people more than you may know. Especially, like when I've dealt with the judgmental people, the bullies, the again, the judgmental people as far as the dating wise. Just because I'm in a wheelchair, I've actually never been on dates or relationships. I've tried. And it's always backfired on me. And a lot of times, well, actually, once, at least that I know of, yes, I tried to date. I tried. I was trying to date someone, and then someone else said something, and unfortunately, that backfired on me. And that happens. I mean, I'm in a wheelchair, so that happens. But the point that I'm trying to make to is this. Don't ever look at someone just based on their looks. Because it doesn't matter how a person looks. What matters is a person's heart. When you pay attention to a person's heart, you see who that person really is. Now, again, there is a lot of jerks out there. Don't get me wrong. And no, I'm not sticking up for nobody, but, a lot of it could be just what they've been through. Maybe it's their lifestyle, that they've been through. And maybe they've been through some of their own hurt. And they feel better just taking it out on other people. Again, not sticking up for anybody. I'm just saying, I pretty much know that feeling. I was born and raised to love, respect, honesty, trust, loyal, faithful, and commitment to one female, I guess I should say, the best way I say it, when it comes to, dating and relationships. No relationship. And that goes for anything, whether it's being a friend to someone or whatever the case may be. Just because that person, like I said, looks different doesn't mean that they are different. I may look different because I'm in a wheelchair. And that goes for anybody that's in a wheelchair. They may look different, but does that mean they're different? No, it does not. Because, again, when you take a wheelchair away from somebody, what do you have? You have a 100% human with a 100% different, but also 100% true story about them. So, again, always remember that. Just because a person might look different than you or somebody else, just because you see a person, sitting in a wheelchair or walking with a walker or walking with crutches or whatever, or even a walking cane whatever the case may be, nobody's different. They might look different, with those things that I just named, like a wheelchair, a walker, crutches, or a walking cane. They might look different. But does that mean that they are different? No, it does not. They might look different, and it might take, a little time to get used to it, with that person that's in a wheelchair or a walker, or, walking with a walker, or walking with crutches, or even a walking. It might take a while, some time to get used to that. But that doesn't mean that a person is different. That's just their way of going from point A to point B, or wherever they need to be. Some cases, like I said, they might have to use a wheelchair. They might have to use a walker, or crutches, or a walking cane. And they might have to have braces on. But just because you see a person in a wheelchair, a person walking with a walker, a person walking with crutches, or even a walking cane, does not mean that that person is any different than you. They have to do things a lot, differently. From when it comes to getting from point A to point B, but that doesn't mean that they're any different than you. So just always remember this. Again, just because a person looks different doesn't mean that they are different. It just means they got to go about certain things a different way. Now, for example, this is kind of personal, but I'll tell you this. When most people take a shower, for example, most people are standing in the shower, right? And for those that are walking, know exactly what I mean. If you're able to stand, you're able to stand in the shower. Now, for someone like myself, that also, that has a wheelchair, as I've shown you, for me, I have to sit like on a stool, for example, as what I had to think of that word, but what I use a stool to sit on, because again, my balance, for one, is not strong enough. It's not good enough to hold me up, to stand on my own. Plus, my ankles are not strong enough to hold, to be able to stand on all my, hold myself up with my ankles, my ankles aren't strong enough to hold my weight. Because, again, my ankles aren't strong because I'm in my wheelchair. So, with that said, never pay attention to how a person looks. Always pay attention to a person's heart. It's more about how a person is. Pardon me. I had to sneeze. That came out of nowhere. Oh boy. But what I'm saying to you is this. Pay attention to how a person is. Don't pay attention to how a person looks. It's not based on looks. It's based on a person's heart. And if you see a person that, that's always low about things, that always talks low about things, I'll put it that way. Maybe you're friends with somebody that on a certain social media, whether that social media may be, maybe you're friends with them, but you see that one friend always posts and talks, low about things. That's not who a person is. But that's what a person's been through. And a lot of times, what a person's been through can be and is traumatizing. Why? Because they've been through that same scenario more than once. In some cases, it's your whole life. And that's something that I've been through my whole life, is the judgment, the let on, the lie to, I was bullied 3 or more 4 times because of having a wheelchair. But take that wheelchair away, and what do you have? You have a person. And that's the way, no matter what person's situation is, that's how you treat somebody. Don't treat somebody as, we can get away with this, we can get away with that because this person is in a wheelchair, or this person is on a walker, walking with a walker or crutches. Guess what? There's no getting away, because I promise you, you really fucking things up. Excuse my language, but that's just what way I'm gonna say it. Because you're really talking yourself out of good people. Because even though someone has a wheelchair, or they're walking with a walker, or even crutches, or even a walking cane, doesn't mean that person or persons is any different than anyone else. It just means that they got a different way of going about things for a certain time. Sometimes it could be for, the whole life. Sometimes it could be, a couple months or a couple years, depending on what the situation is. So again, that's my point. Don't worry about what a person has. In other words, don't worry about that person's wheelchair. Don't worry about that person's walker. Pay attention to the person, not what they're confined with, like being confined with a wheelchair or a walker or crutches or even a walking cane. Because guess what? That wheelchair, that walker, those crutches, that walking cane, that's all part of a person. That's how a person has to do things for a certain amount of time. Or always. And it just depends on what that situation or situations is. So again, don't pay attention so much to a person's disability. Pay attention to the person itself. In other words, pay attention to the person, not what their disability is. Yes, that person with the disability, whatever that disability might be, might talk about that disability a lot. Why could that be? Well, that's because that disability has always got to them. That's always got to them, with how a lot of people have always been. Whether it be, people that you've known in person, even if it's somebody you don't know. So always remember that. Don't pay attention to a person's disability and what their disability causes them to have. Pay attention to the person. Because there's more to a person than a person's disability. Keep that in mind always. There's more to a person than a person's disability. But always remember, that disability can and does get to people that have that disability because of all the hell that they've been through. And maybe you haven't been through that again. Maybe you haven't been through the hell that they've been through. But with that said, again, all it takes is one person just to listen and maybe, give your feedback, and try to compromise with that person. In other words, try to understand where that person is coming from. Try to find their not so strong points and help them build those points that are not so strong. Try to help them build them points up to where they're a lot stronger. So be there for somebody. But again, you might be the only one that's there for that person. Just like me. I'm sitting here, I'm in a wheelchair, as I've shown you. Just like I've shown you my back tattoos a couple days ago. But just because I'm in a wheelchair doesn't mean nothing. I mean, I could sit there and say, I'm not going to do this YouTube anymore. Simply, I don't care, I really don't care. I can say that. But in all honesty, I do care. And I'm not just saying that to be saying that. I'm saying that from my heart. Because I do care. And I always will care. Again, that's how I was born and raised. That's not what I've been through, but that's how I was born and raised. And that's exactly how I always will be. No matter what life throws at me. That's exactly the kind of person that I'm always going to be, to show love and care to everybody. That's exactly what I'm saying here on this YouTube. With this YouTube channel. Because, when I can get the chance to help somebody, make somebody smile, I'm going to go for it. Or, when I get the chance to, if I get the chance to save someone's life, guess what? I'm going to go for it. Every chance that I get, I'm going to take. And that's another thing I'm telling you. When you get the chance on anything, take that chance. And again, something so small to you could be a huge situation to someone else. And that huge situation someone else might talk about, guess what? You might have already been through it. But guess what? They're the ones having trouble with it. Because is the best way to say it. And the reason why they're talking about it is because that's something they've always had trouble with. And maybe they're looking for advice, on how to get through that. Or to get through those things. So keep being you. And let nothing or no one hold you back. I'm proud of you. Each and every one of you. And no, I'm not just saying that. I mean that from my heart. So again, never pay attention to what a person has, like a wheelchair or a walker or crutches or even a walking cane. Pay attention to the person, not what a person has, to help them get around places, like a wheelchair, walker, walking cane. Pay attention to the person. Because I promise you, the person behind that, the person that's in that wheelchair, the person that's walking with that walker or walking with those crutches or even walking with a walking cane is a real person that has real feelings, just like each and every one of you who might be walking on your own. And you know what? Pay attention to that person, not the situation that that person has dealt with, but pay attention to that person, not the situation that they're dealt with. Always pay attention to a person and not the situation or situations that that person has dealt with. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, of how much a person is really the true person that they are. I love y'all. And no, I'm not just saying that either. Just because this is here on YouTube. I'm saying that from my heart. I'm saying that from my heart. And that's the kind of person exactly that I was born and raised to be. And that I always will be. I promise you that. This wheelchair, that's just me. That's just the way I get around right now. From point A to point B. You know, yes, I have a bad elbow. Stupid thing keeps falling down. You know, I have a bad elbow. But, again, that was caused from a lot of things. But that doesn't take away the person that I am. Because I will always be that person that loves to motivate, inspire, and try to help as many people as I can in any way that I can. And again, you don't see that I'm wrapped up right now. As you can see, this little bit of this tattoo, it says, on the side where it says, "Let's get it." Now, I want to show you. I showed you that one because, I showed you my back tattoos, but I showed you this one as much as I could without taking my wrap off my arm. Again, you see it says, "Let's get it." Now, the strip behind that one is this again. And this is, again, for all new viewers. Or even the viewers that's already been, that's been with me from day one. Or subscribers that's been with me from day one. Even when I had to change content. You always hear me say, "Let's get it," right? And the reason I say "let's get it" all the time is something that is something that I and my is something that me and my father always said to each other when I was growing up. From when I was a little kid. Damn, time flies by, that's for sure. But that's just something that my dad and I always said, together for sure. That we always said to get, to each other, whether I was going to a workout, no matter where I was going to, or when I went to get my GED, which I passed after a few times. It took me about 4, maybe 5 times to pass it, but I kept going, and I kept going, and I kept going, and kept going, and going. Finally, I passed it. And what took me so long to pass that was the math part. Math and me do not mix. Math was never my Strong subject. But I still did. I still passed it. I remember that call, and I thought, I'm gonna take this again, And I called and I said, "Hey, I'm Zach, and I need to reschedule to take my GED exam." And they said, "Hold on a second." And they came back towards, on the phone and said, "You passed." When they told me I passed, I was floored. I think it was by a couple points that I passed, but I was scared. I was nervous about it because, and again, it was the math that I was nervous about. But I passed that math by a few points, and I took my time on it, and I still passed. So keep going, keep being you, and let nothing or no one hold you back. And again, don't worry about someone's disability. If you see someone with a disability, and maybe they're asking you out or what have you, they're asking you out on that date or that relationship, go for it. I must say go for it, because guess what? That person that's asked you out, they're just like you. They're exactly like you. 100% human, with a 100% different, but also 100% true story about them. Never let looks detour your thinking of someone, okay? In other words, don't let a person's looks hold you back. In other words, don't, if you see a person in a wheelchair, don't let that wheelchair stop you from maybe dating that person, or, even talking to that person. Because really, all you're doing is saying no and turning the person down for no reason. When the wheelchairs or the walkers or the crutches or even the walking aids, that's just how a person gets around. Always pay attention to the person and not their disability. That's what a lot of people need to understand, and that's what I'll title this. Pay attention to pay attention to the person and not their disability. Because again, a disability is just part of a person. That's part of what they go through, I guess, is what that is. And in some cases, a person's disability is, how they get around. If you see a person in a wheelchair, that's just how they get person, that's part of their disability. And that's how they get around. Again, that's how I get around because of my disability, which is just, which is spina bifida, which is just affects my balance, and that's it. If it wasn't on my balance, I'd be up running miles. And the first chance I get when I first start learning to walk, I will go walk a mile. I will go to the, high school track, and I will walk that mile. That's 4 laps. I will walk that when I get the chance and I start really walking. And I say that I'm going to do that because that's my mindset. That's my mindset of what I want to do. I want to be able to learn to walk. And if I get where I'm walking on my own, that's one thing that I'll do is I'll go walk a mile. I won't run a mile, but I'll just walk a mile, and I won't just and I'll be taking my time with it. That's my goal. That's one of my goals. If I get walking, when that's gonna be, and I say when and if, because I don't know when that's gonna be. But again, don't ever judge a person by their disability. In other words, don't judge a person by their wheelchairs or walkers or crutches or walking canes, or even don't judge a person by one that you see wears braces all the time. Maybe they wear braces all the time, and maybe you see a person wear braces on Monday, but maybe on a Tuesday or Wednesday, they don't have those braces on. And I must say something to you about that as well. And that is because, maybe a person who goes to the gym and works out, okay, those days that a person works out, like say a person works out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example, and those Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, they wear braces. Now, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and even Saturdays and Sundays, their legs are tired. They're just they're just relaxed. It's those days that they want to recover, and be ready to go again for the next workout and the next workout, and the next workout. So, again, please don't judge a person by their disability at all. A person's disability is part of them. In other words, it's how they handle things with their disability. In other words, as someone with spina bifida, like I was telling you about that I have, or that I was born with, this wheelchair is part of me. In other words, that's how I get from point A to point B, or, to wherever I'm going. But inside this wheelchair you see a real person, as I'm saying, talking to you. So again, don't judge how a person looks. Don't judge what they have, but look at the person that's in that wheelchair, that's on those walkers or crutches or whatever the case may be. With that said, yes, making this a working, paying job, because I love to help people, and that's the number one reason. So let's get it.